For more than a century, we've been honoring those who signed up and served our country, here at home and across the globe. This Veterans Day, we hear from generations of Gem State servicemen and women who gave so much of themselves to protect freedom, and who would gladly do it again. He was one of only 2 Idahoans to protect the tomb of the unknown soldier. A year and a half walking sacred ground in Arlington can certainly give you a unique perspective. And speaking of perspective, not all who serve leave their battles behind. Sometimes coming home and fighting a stigma is a lot harder than facing the enemy that's in front of you. A Veterans Day News at 5 is next.
You're watching Idaho's News Channel 7. This is the News at 5.
My name is James Dollar. I'm a U.S. Army veteran, and I served from 1990 to 2016. Well, Veterans Day originally came out of World War I. America had lost 116,000 men in that conflict. This is war on a scale that had not been seen by the rest of the world ever. On the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, the armistice was signed that ended hostilities in Europe. A year later, on the anniversary, President Woodrow Wilson declared that there would be Armistice Day, and that we would remember the sacrifices of the men that served and their bravery and appreciate the victory. This was done with parades and ceremonies, and there was a 2-minute cessation of business at 11 a.m. In 1926, the Congress decided that they would make a formal declaration. It was not just a celebration of the soldiers that served in World War I, it was a celebration of peace, and it was actually a peace holiday. Of course, it was a little early because in 1939, World War II began. And in 1954, President Eisenhower, in order to recognize the service of all those who served in World War II and Korea, changed it to Veterans Day. The last addition to it was in 2016, President Obama signed a Veterans Day moment of silence, so that at 3:11 in the afternoon, there's supposed to be a 2-minute of silence recognized by the United States people. Here in America, we are blessed with prosperity and freedom, but what we are often short of is gratitude. It's an opportunity to reach out and thank those people who guaranteed those safeties, that prosperity, and freedoms.
There are more than 18 million veterans in the United States today, and U.S. Census stats show that Idaho is home to more than 115,000 of them, with around 50,000 veterans living here in the Treasure Valley alone. And according to the National World War II Museum, there are about 2,700 vets from the greatest generation that are still living in the Gem State, a figure that shrinks significantly every single day. Now, that's a lot of numbers to throw at you, whether it's years of service, your regiment, your deployments, but they only tell a small part of the story of what it means to be a veteran. We sat down with several of them, 6 Idahoans who served from the Pacific Theater during World War II to fighting on the front lines against ISIS in Syria, to let them tell their version of what it means to be a veteran.
Full name is Wallace Wright, Jr. I served in the U.S. Navy for 8 years. I'm very proud of it. When I was 16, I told my mom, I said, Mom, I gotta get out of here. I mean, I just have to get out of here. I liked the Navy, I liked it very much. The Navy made a human being out of me.
My name is Colton Nelson. I served for 4 years in the United States Marine Corps. I always wanted to join the military, ever since I was like a little kid pretending to be a grunt, running around with sticks and stuff. I remember all the aftermath of 9/11, and I guess you could say that's kind of where I built most of my ambition to go, was the aftermath of 9/11.
My name is Judith Amy. I served in the U.S. Navy Nurse Corps. I was stationed aboard the USS Repose. It was on station in Vietnam. So the plane is landing in Da Nang, and there are all these towers around with guards protecting the planes. And so they said, you need to get off the plane as quickly as you can, get away from the aircraft.
Yeah, the base I went to in '68 was the most hit base in the whole country. I thought, well, I guess they sent me here for a reason. Robert Kenneth Keene, United States Air Force, been to Air Base, Vietnam.
I know when the plane landed in Tan Son in Saigon, I happened to see a Jeep down at the bottom with a machine gun mounted in the back. I guess reality kicked in. You know, we're not in Kansas anymore.
A friend of mine told me that we were going to send a flotilla of destroyers in Tokyo Bay, and I had better get in there before the war's over. So I got in. My name is Leroy A. Olson. At the age of 17, I enlisted in the U.S. Navy. I served on a landing craft infantry. What we did is picked up troops in staging areas and landed them on hostile beaches.
I would probably say most of the time I felt like I was in a movie, that it wasn't really quite real, that this was just something that you only see on the screen.
The war was like a big movie, except when you got hit. That seemed to be it.
I was in Incheon Harbor in Korea, and one of the minesweepers either got hit or blew up or something, and we were fairly close to it, and I and a couple guys started jumping in. We went in to try to help them out, you know. I had my first one in, I went back for the second one, and then that's when our ship got hit, and I got hit in the stomach, and the guy had shrapnel in my left leg in 4 or 5 places. And
the way we worked on the ship, you're 12 hours on, 12 hours off. That's just what you did. And so I was with them a lot. And it was really an amazing experience.
At least once a week I could expect a letter from Mom. And I'd look forward to it after a while, you know. And of course, there was no phones, you know. Back in those days, our family didn't have phones.
Even while I was in Syria, they brought out a Wi-Fi station for all the troops, and you could go there and I could call my family, I could call my wife, and talk to them pretty much on a daily basis, which was fantastic.
We conquered New Guinea and the Philippines, and it was on practically every invasion in the Philippines. I hit every island, and we did win the war. That's the whole point.
It looked like we lost that war because North Vietnam did take over. And America doesn't like losing. And so people who lose are losers. And I think that was part of the philosophy too. If we'd been victorious, that would have been a different story.
I think it was tougher coming back than it was over there. Granted, you're dodging munitions, but the way a lot of the guys were treated when they came back, it wasn't right.
Our soldiers and Marines would go on liberty from the hospital in Oakland, and they'd go to Berkeley and get beaten up and accosted and so forth. And so I knew about that, but somehow I thought it would be different for me. And I really thought that other nurses would want to hear about the experience, you know, just professionally. Nurses quickly learned, don't talk about it.
I think it would help if they understood more. Even guys today, you know, they're coming back pretty well shot up, beat up, and what have you.
I didn't want anybody to look on me as maybe being a wartime hero, because I was really nothing, you know.
But as far as Veterans Day, we always had a parade downtown. All the local veterans would throw on the old uniforms and go marching down Main Street, or if they couldn't walk, they'd be in the back of like a fire truck or something. And I loved it. I loved showing support for the people that have served the country, and I couldn't wait to be a part of it myself.
Would I do it again? Wow. I'd do it in a heartbeat again, never ask the question why. Yes, I would. I would be proud to. I'd be very proud to.
It's a wonderful experience, really.
You know, the situation had to be taken care of. And essentially, I assume I helped take care of it.
Yes, if needed, I'd go back in a heartbeat. I was doing a job. At least that's the way I looked at it. Yeah, I'm proud I'm a veteran.
Just doing a job, that's what they all said. J.R. Wright, the Korean veteran you just heard from, who was awarded a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star, said he never told his children about the injuries he received trying to save those men out of Inchon Bay. He just said he never felt like it was necessary. They each had so many amazing stories to tell. It was a pleasure to sit down and listen to them. But what is also amazing is, to a man and to a woman, they each said, as you just heard, they would all do it all over again if they were given the chance, which is pretty amazing. Well, you just heard from 5 of the veterans here around the Treasure Valley. We spoke with the 6th as well. He has a slightly different perspective to share, one that sadly still carries with it a stigma and secludes so many in silence. Why the battle doesn't end at the end of their deployment. Stay with us. Camping is intense. You probably heard that joke. Sean Hinkle is no joke, and he takes intensity to another level. The Bora High graduate played football, wrestling, hockey, and he also did track while he was in high school. So about the only other thing where he could focus that excess and energy, the United States Marine Corps. Sean spent 5 years as a grunt from 2009 through 2014 and deployed to Afghanistan several times. He refused to talk about his injuries. Once shot in the back, another time he stepped on an IED. And while he walked away from those, he says stepping away from the Corps hasn't been so easy.
But for those months that you're there, you're in combat. That's your job. So that's a long period of time to have bullets flying over your head, to have mortars coming down on you, to have all that stuff, to be scared for your life. And all you have to think about is not dying. Being a Marine is a lifestyle. It's not just a job that you do. And then on top of that, being in the infantry, it's exactly what a Marine is supposed to be. My name's Sean Hinkle. I was in the United States Marine Corps and I served in Afghanistan. Veterans Day is not necessarily a hard day. What's harder is the fact that I lost friends around Veterans Day. While you're there, you have to kind of push it in the back of your mind. You can't sit there and think about it because you still got stuff to do. You still got to put work in. So it hit me after I got out, is when it really hit me. And, you know, the best way that I can explain it is it creates a void, you know, because you don't want to talk about it. You don't want anything to do with it. You just want to get as far away from it as you possibly can. But at the same time, you're denying yourself because it's still who you are. There was like a hole inside of me that I couldn't fill because I was missing my brothers, you know, and then it just kind of went downhill from there. I didn't want to get out of bed. And I didn't want to get out of bed because I couldn't fall asleep. And I couldn't fall asleep because I was avoiding having nightmares. And when I avoided it, it hurt more and more and more. That depression, it's so hard to come back from. It's damn near impossible, actually, you know, to the point where there's a reason a lot of veterans commit suicide. It's because they don't have anybody there, you know, or they don't have anybody to understand them. The first time I was still married, drank a little too much, or a lot too much, about an entire bottle of bourbon and an entire bottle of scotch, and had a flashback, and I was going in and out. And then when I got to the hospital, I'd been told them that I had been thinking about some of my friends, and that I didn't want to live anymore. And then the second time was after my divorce, you know, just put all of that, my whole life crashing down. And I just took a bunch of pills and hoped I wasn't going to wake up in the morning, but I did. That was a pretty bad time. It's just one of those things, like, unless you have buddies around you that are always around you, you know, you're going to have a hard time. And I hope you do have guys around you that are there for you, because it's not a fun ride. It's really not. What Veterans Day would mean to me, it means a lot. You know, it means that people understand what we've done, what we had to go through in order to be here. Like, we made it back alive, you know? So Veterans Day means a lot to me.
Sean says he's only just begun to get his life back together. He's been out of the Marines for about 5 years, but about a year ago, he started hanging out with other Marines, taking jiu-jitsu classes, and he's now a student at Boise State. And if you're a veteran in crisis, we want you to be aware of some options that you have. The Boise Vet Center offers adjustment counseling and has several outreach programs that will get you together with other vets with similar interests as you. Sometimes it's just enough to be a part of a group again. They have a Facebook page and they also have a phone number. It's 208-342-3612. You can also reach out to the Veterans Crisis Hotline. That number is on your screen. It's 1-800-273-8255. You can also text 838255 to talk with a VA responder, and we urge you to take that step to get some help. When we come back, meteorologist Bree Eggers is going to have your forecast right after this.
Starting with our highs today, mid-50s for the valley locations and mid-40s up in our higher elevations. So this is a little more typical of an atmospheric setup for us. I hope you got a little relief out in the horizon with the air quality. A little bit better for us today as that temperature inversion had weakened a touch. However, this is our big high pressure ridge that will re-strengthen and rebuild over the area, putting that temperature inversion back in place, which is why the air stagnation advisory continues for southeastern Oregon and for the Treasure Valley down through the Magic Valley. It's been reissued starting tomorrow morning, and that'll stay in effect through Thursday evening. Not a lot of change in our 7-day forecast, with temperatures still staying about 5 to even 10 degrees above seasonal averages through the end of the week, with a better chance for showers as we move into next week. Brian?
I could, but I won't. John McGee says he will not challenge a runoff for seat 6 of Caldwell City Council. McGee making that announcement today in Caldwell. He explained that although he and his legal team think they could successfully challenge the runoff, they won't. The city of Caldwell said today they are aware of the opinion from McGee, but they stand by their decision. Caldwell adds they will clarify their ordinance in the next few weeks so that election results and runoff protocol are clear for the future. And it's amazing how much weight 35,000 votes carry. Boise Mayor Dave Beater says he will call for a pause on the main library project, saying it's a response to going over the initial budget set by the city council. And last week, voters reinforced that need to start fresh, overwhelmingly passing Proposition 1, which would require voter approval of such projects. You're going to hear from both Beater and his mayoral runoff opponent, Lauren McLean, coming up tonight on our news at 6. He may never have faced live fire from an enemy, but he served on one of the most prestigious units in our country's military, keeping watch over those who never made it home. A Meridian High School grad is just one of only 2 Idahoans to ever take watch over the tomb of the unknown soldier. Being in the military is being called to serve, and a lot of veterans continue to do just that, even after they step away from their formal service duties. Jerry Haynes is one of those vets. About 5 years ago, he began helping Heart in Home hospice care with their pinning ceremonies. It's a program they offer to the veterans in their care to recognize them for their service. Jerry served 25 years in the Army National Guard and was part of our air defense program in California. He basically was in charge of watching out for nuclear missiles coming in from Russia during the early years and height of the Cold War, so he knows what it's like to be called on to protect our country. Jerry, who lives in Fruitland, says he's been involved with about 30 pinnings around the Gem State, and he says each one is special, even if the veterans he's honoring don't believe they are special. Coming up Wednesday on the News at 10, we went with Jerry during one of his pinning ceremonies, and we're going to bring you that story on this week's Idaho Life. It's been guarded 24 hours a day, 7 days a week since 1937. And since then, thousands of soldiers have walked the mat in front of the tomb of the unknown soldier in Arlington National Cemetery. In all that time, only 2 of those guards have come from Idaho. One of those soldiers is Todd Carlson, a 1986 graduate of Meridian High School. Todd often does talks about his time in the Army's 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment, the oldest active infantry unit in the military. It's why they call those chosen to watch over the tomb the Old Guard. Todd says he had no intention of even joining the military when he was in high school, but within 18 months of graduating, he was part of the most elite military unit in the world. In his talk, he tells people about being on duty for 24-hour shifts, the 21 steps they take in front of the monument as part of their march, the 21 seconds he would stand facing the tomb before turning and walking the other direction, a routine they would repeat sometimes for 2 hours at a time. The Tomb of the Unknowns holds the remains of one soldier from each of our biggest conflicts: World War I, World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War. Todd spent a year and a half at Arlington, watching over the 624 acres of more than 400,000 deceased military members. He says his favorite time at the cemetery was at night, when the cemetery was completely empty, quiet, and it was just him and the unknowns. He says he learned a lot as a member of the old guard, but mostly that his duty was bigger than himself.
So that probably at a young age, at 20, 21 years old, and you figure out, hey, it's not all about you. Yeah, you're a young 21-year-old kid that thinks he's got the world by the tail, but it's not about you. That's not why you're here. And it took me a while to figure that out.
Todd says veterans are much different than anybody else. They just had a weird job for a while where they went and did some crazy stuff. He says Veterans Day is about thanking those that have served our country in any capacity. So when you meet one, a handshake and a thank you is all that is needed. And a thank you to those who are still considered missing in action, like those names that you're seeing on your screen right now, and have yet to make it home. We would be remiss if we failed to mention families on this Veterans Day, the loved ones left at home to tend to the kids, to worry, to pray, to fill in the gaps that usually take two to do. So if you get the chance to say thank you to a vet today, hopefully you get to send some of those thoughts to their families as well. Those that said, go ahead, do your thing, we got this. We'll be here when you get back. And we'll be back here on the news at 6. But also, if you're looking to maybe cash in on a deal, a lot of businesses out there that are willing to offer some deals to veterans and active military members and their families. You can find all of those in a list at ktvb.com. Nightly News is